We, the jury, find by a vote of 9-3 that Wade Wilson should be sentenced to death. We, the jury, find by a vote of 10-2 that Wade Wilson should be sentenced to death.
A Florida man who was sentenced to death last month for the shocking murders of 2 women is making headlines once again, now setting his sights on the state attorney's office and Lee County Sheriff's Office. So let's go back to the beginning. Wade Wilson received the ultimate punishment for the brutal and horrific October 2019 murders of Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz. Prosecutors say the tatted killer murdered Christine and Diane just for the sake of killing.
Christine Melton was 35 years old when she died. She was found in her South Cape Coral residence, wrapped in some bedding, tied with some shirts and leggings and a bathing suit top. Her face was black and blue. Her fingernails were broken. She had marks around her neck as she lied on the floor between her bedroom and the kitchen area of her residence. Diane Ruiz was 43 years old. She was found on an empty lot under some shrubs, under a tree, just lying there. Her nose had been broken. Her hyoid bone and thyroid cartilage had been broken. She had suffered multiple rib fractures, not only front, but also in the back. Now, what you're going to learn during the course of this trial, ladies and gentlemen, is that Ms. Ruiz and Ms. Melton had 3 things in common. Both of them died on the 7th of October of 2019. Both of them had been strangled. And both of them, before they were forever silenced, the last person that they encountered was Mr. Wade Wilson.
While behind bars, Wilson continued to rack up charges. He had cases for attempted meth trafficking and even an attempt to escape from jail. Since his 2019 arrest, he even began sporting a more menacing look with heavier tattoos, including a swastika, a tattoo under his chin that reads "Bread for War," and an infamous Joker smile, just to name a few. But during trial, he didn't even bother to cover up his tattoos. And the trial was quick, only lasting a couple of days. Several witnesses took the stand for his trial. Some notable testimony came from Wilson's father, who revealed his son made a shocking confession.
I want to go back to that dinner time call. When he talked about these 2 people who were no longer with us and that he was a killer, did he show any type of remorse?
No, ma'am.
So let's go now to the 10 o'clock call. Again, your wife knew about kind of what was going on during that day?
Yes, ma'am.
And when he called back at 10, did he go into more details about what he had told you earlier?
Yes, ma'am.
So let's start with the first girl. If you could tell the jurors, what did he tell you?
He just said he met a girl at a bar. They went back to her house, hung out for a little bit, and then she fell asleep.
What did he say happened after she fell asleep?
He said he got on top of her and choked her.
What name did he call her? Did he refer to her in a derogatory term?
He said, I choked that.
Okay. And what did he say he did after he choked her?
He said he stayed in the house for a little while, and then he rolled her up and was going to try to put her in her trunk, but he couldn't lift her.
Did he say why he was unable to put her in her trunk?
He said that he felt like rigor mortis had started to set in.
And does rigor mortis make your body stiff? You didn't know?
I think so.
So he just told you that that was the reason that he couldn't lift her and get her into her trunk?
Yes, ma'am.
And when he said her trunk, it was the trunk of her car he was going to put her in?
Yes, ma'am.
So what did he tell you he did when he couldn't get her body into her own trunk?
He left her there and took her car.
What did he say about the second girl?
He said he saw her walking down the street and stopped and asked her for directions. And she got in the car with him.
What did he say happened once she got in the car with him?
He said he reached over and choked her.
And did he tell you that he choked her while he was driving?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, what did he say happened after he choked her?
He said he was looking for a place to put her body.
Did he find a place where he eventually dumped her body?
Yes, ma'am.
What did he tell you about the situation when he got to the place where he was going to dump her body?
He said that he pulled her out of the car and realized that she was still breathing.
So what did he tell you he did when he realized she's still breathing?
He said he got back in the car and ran her over until she looked like spaghetti.
And while the case was never a whodunit case, but a why did they do it case, Wilson's defense attorney claimed he committed the brutal slayings because he was out of his mind.
We're not arguing he didn't do it. There's solid evidence that he is responsible for those 2 deaths and the battery of Miss Montanez. But Miss Montanez's testimony, you need to think about that, whether this was premeditated Miss Middleton had sex with him. He could have just gotten up and left or stayed with her. Instead, he murders her? That's not clear thinking, shall we say. I'm not arguing insanity. I'm just arguing that the state's claiming premeditation, and I'm saying he's whacked out. He's just out of his mind for any of this.
But for the Florida jurors, it would only take just about 2 hours of deliberations to find him guilty of first-degree murder for the deaths of Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz. And during the penalty phase of the trial, it would take jurors only 90 minutes before giving their recommendation for death. After his sentencing, Wilson continued to make headlines, first for the thousands of letters women sent to him even after his conviction, and now for his civil lawsuit against the Lee County Sheriff's Office and the State Attorney's Office. In documents obtained by Law&Crime, the suit names the plaintiffs as Wade Wilson and Jesse Tehanika. Tehanika's connection to Wilson isn't exactly clear, but it's been rumored she's the killer's girlfriend. The reason for this civil lawsuit is also unclear because the files are confidential under seal. But would a Reddit post reveal more into why the two were suing the State Attorney's Office and Sheriff's Office? According to a post which states the Reddit poster obtained the State Attorney's response to the lawsuit, the suit allegedly stems from the release of Wilson's recorded jailhouse calls. And the State Attorney's Office allegedly responded to the suit saying, after a thorough review by LCSO's public records units and social media platforms managed by LCSO, no evidence has been found to indicate the release of any such calls by LCSO except through standard investigative and prosecutorial channels for LCSO remains responsible under the law. It is apparent that any publicized calls involving the move-ins were shared by third parties over whom LCSO has no control. This undermines the assertion that LCSO is responsible for these releases. But from what we can confirm now from court documents we've obtained, under remedies sought, it says they are seeking non-monetary declaratory or injunctive relief, meaning a court order that prohibits or requires specific action. Under the filing, it says the case is not a class action lawsuit and they aren't seeking a jury trial. Well, this is an excellent time now to bring on former prosecutor Melba Pearson. Melba, always so great to see you. Now, a lot is unclear at this moment, but what's your reaction to a convicted double murderer, that being Wade Wilson, suing the Lee County Sheriff's Office and the State Attorney's Office?
Yeah, so Elizabeth, always great to be on with you. This is a bit of a bizarre turn of events because usually when you see someone who has been convicted of such serious charges has now been sentenced to the death penalty, you would see the traditional appeals process begin. So basically, the defense counsel for the defendant will file an appeal for a number of grounds. Maybe they didn't feel the trial was fair. Maybe they felt certain items of evidence were inadmissible. Maybe they felt the jury instructions were read incorrectly by the judge. Whatever the grounds may be, they usually file an appeal. And usually the appeals process is not something that's resolved overnight. It's multiple years. You're looking 5, 7, maybe even 10 years of the appeals process as, first you appeal from the trial court to your next highest court. It varies, of course, in every state. Then you may end up going up to, the Florida Supreme Court looking for relief. You may now try to transition into the federal system and try to get the U.S. Supreme Court to maybe hear your case and stay your execution. So this is kind of a long trajectory post-trial. So it's a little surprising that he's now also filing a civil lawsuit against the prosecutor's office as well as the sheriff's department. Now, what's very interesting here is that since it's a civil lawsuit, he's not looking for monetary damages. He's looking for injunctive relief, which basically means you're preventing someone, the judge would make a ruling, preventing one party from doing a particular course of action. So my guess would be, again, since nothing is publicly available as to the actual grounds of the civil lawsuit, my guess would be that it was to stay his execution until there's some sort of resolution in terms of maybe he's accusing the state attorney's office of wrongful or malicious prosecution. Maybe he's trying to sue the police department for wrongful arrest or wrongful detainment. Not quite sure where he thinks he'll go with that because, again, there was plenty of evidence showing that he was guilty of the crimes that he committed and that it didn't seem to be that either entity was targeting him. So again, I'm not quite sure what the injunctive relief would be, as in, okay, well, don't execute him yet. Well, if you're going through the appeals process, you wouldn't be executed anyway until all your appeals have been exhausted, meaning that entire process, you've gone to every single court, they've all told you no, and now you're going to have a date set for execution. So I almost feel like it's premature unless there's something more to the pleadings that, again, none of us are aware of because it has yet to be unsealed.
And it's unverified right now, but according to a Reddit post, which is alleged to have had the state attorney's response, again, these documents are supposed to be sealed, but it seems to focus on the recorded phone calls between Jesse Tehanika there, and Wade Wilson and how they were released. What's your reaction to that allegedly being kind of the focus of the civil lawsuit?
So again, it all depends on the context of how these phone calls were obtained and released. The reality is all jail phone calls are recorded. Anytime you call someone in custody, the first message is, this call is being recorded. So there's no question as to the fact that you have notice that this call is being recorded, meaning someone is going to listen to whatever it is you say on the call. So if this is within the context of jail phone calls, he doesn't have a leg to stand on because anything you say in those recordings are fair game and can be used as evidence against you in your case in chief. When I was a prosecutor, listen, it's a painful thing, but you listen to all the jail calls having to do with a particular person that's in custody in the hopes that they actually revealed something. Now, granted, you cannot listen to anything that is attorney-client privilege. So if there's any indication that the person in custody is speaking to their legal counsel, you have to immediately hang up. You cannot use that because, again, it's protected by attorney-client privilege. But outside of that, if the defendant Wade Wilson were to make some kind of admission to the other person that is mentioned in this lawsuit, it's fair game. So if that's the angle he's trying to go, I don't see that as being successful.
And why do you think that the civil lawsuit does remain confidential and remain sealed right now?
I'm not entirely clear as to why it's being sealed. I don't know if there's some other sensitive information that's involved or other people that have not been charged with crimes or somehow being named as either witnesses or something along those lines. But it just adds to that air of mystery as to what is this really all about.
And how common is it for inmates, especially death row inmates, to file complaints, civil complaints against the sheriff's office and state attorney's office? Have you ever seen something like this before?
I have. It's not uncommon, but what's uncommon is the timing because of the fact that he just got sentenced and he has not exhausted his appeals process. He hasn't even filed his first appeal, to my understanding. They're, of course, researching and getting things ready, but they have not, in fact, filed their first appeal as of yet. So to me, it's just a little strange that you would now try to get this civil relief, and again, you're not asking for money, you're asking for injunctive relief. So that's either somehow getting the case dropped against you or dismissed, which I don't necessarily see that as an option, or to stay your execution, which again is nowhere near scheduled because you have to go through the entire appeals process. So I am very, very curious to see what else is being set forth in this complaint, because this is definitely strange again in terms of timing and their request of what kind of relief they're looking for.
I do want to kind of ask this question to you. It's been kind of interesting seeing this amount of supporters for Wade Wilson, who is convicted of one double murder, but this heinous, horrific crime against these two victims, these two women here back in October of 2019. What are your thoughts on kind of his appeal to women specifically who have either written him love letters or supported him and not wanting to see him, one either behind bars or two getting the death penalty?
Well, listen, there's the saying of there's a pot for every lid. I mean, I can't see what even remotely is appealing about him. I suppose if you have a Joker fetish, maybe that could be the reason, but I'm not seeing what exactly is appealing here. Now, this is not an unusual phenomenon. We saw it with Ted Bundy. We saw it with the Menendez brothers. I think even maybe Jeffrey Dahmer got some fan mail too. Like there's this weird fascination with serial killers, and I'm not quite sure why any woman in her right mind would find him attractive, because not only is he just not attractive and has a lot of tattoos. Not that tattoos in and of itself are a problem, but just the facial tattoos and the types of tattoos. And secondly, the fact that he is aligned with a very violent, racist prison gang, the Aryan Brotherhood. I mean, there's layers and layers of like, there is nothing nice or interesting or attractive about this man. And more importantly, he violated women. So if you know that's what he was charged with, I'm not quite seeing how that equates to some sort of attraction. I guess there's some lonely people in this world. I don't know, but it defies logic to me. There is a debate about the death penalty in this country and whether or not it should be abolished nationwide, or if it's actually a deterrent. And there's reasonable arguments to be made on both sides of that, right? So I could see someone, maybe because they're religious or they just don't believe in the death penalty for whatever reason, still wanting to have some sort of contact with him saying, hey, I acknowledge what you did is wrong, but I think your punishment should be life in prison versus the death penalty. That's reasonable to me. But in terms of, oh my gosh, you're so attractive, therefore you shouldn't die, or you shouldn't be in prison, even though you violently, brutalized and murdered two women and also assaulted your own girlfriend. Like, there's nothing here where the math is mathing for me. So people are just interesting.
And I know you had mentioned before that you don't think the civil lawsuit will be successful for the plaintiffs, but where do you think it's going to go from here?
So I think, first of all, I'm hoping that it's unsealed at some point in time so we can get a better idea of what the defendant is alleging and what evidence he purportedly is going to put forth to substantiate his claims. So I believe that it's going to start to wind its way through the civil system. It's possible that it could end up being dismissed if it's a suit without merit, or if the judge looks at all the totality of the evidence that the defendant seeks to introduce in a civil trial, and he's like, there's just no way there's a question for the jury. The judge can then turn around and dismiss it. So any of those things are possible. So we're just going to have to wait and see as it moves its way through the process and go from there. But I do think, based again on what's publicly available and the little nuggets we've heard from different outlets, I don't really see a path to success for that. And I think it was premature.
All right. Well, Melba Pearson, I appreciate your insight as always. Before I sign you off, anything else you'd like to add?
Only just to continue to center the families who have been so deeply impacted by what happened. His ex-girlfriend, who is still coping with possibly survivor's guilt after surviving the encounter with him and sadly seeing another woman murdered after her encounter with him. So those are the folks that we need to be thinking about and uplifting in our thoughts.
All right, Melba, again, thank you so much for your time today. I always appreciate it.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Take good care.
Wade Wilson is reportedly seeking to appeal his double murder conviction, but no substantive documents have been filed. He's currently serving out his sentence at the Union Correctional Institution in Florida. Reporting for Law and Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.